Hello, and welcome back, everybody. Sorry I'm running a little bit late this week. Make sure everything is still working. Looks like my microphone is on, so that's good news. I had some problems with the screen configuration this week, getting the right colors and stuff, and I've still got some issues, so I apologize for those in advance. But nonetheless, we're going to go forward and show you guys a couple of really cool inverters this week. Um, and we'll go switch to a quick view of them here. We're going to look at the 6000XP and we're going to look at the EG4, the 3000. But we'll get back to those later. First, we want to go to a little bit of news. This week we've got some news. I've got a little bit of good news and a little bit of bad news. I want to start with a little bit of Amazon is launching solar-powered tiny homes for under $10,000. It's kind of cool. For those of you who like they're like modular prefabricated tiny homes, like 380 feet or 390 square feet or something like that. Really small, but they're priced under 10 grand and they're totally solar off grid. So that's kind of cool, kind of thing. Also, we have the looks like plug-in solar is gaining more traction. I've seen several videos out there about this, and this is kind of a really cool concept. So they're calling them, I guess the official name, I guess, or the unofficial name, if you want to call it that, is really the portable balcony solars, and it's basically a couple of solar panels that are connected to a wall plug, and you plug the wall plug in and it supplements the power in your house and reduces your usage from the grid and uses that power instead. I guess it's got a little microinverter in it. It's a really cool little concept. And it started off in, I think it was Utah, where they legalized it first, and it looks like it's really catching on now. So that's kind of cool. These kits kind of make it possible for anyone just to kind of, plop some panels down, plug it in, and boom, reduce their load on solar panels. So not, fully off grid or anything like that, but it's kind of cool to see the transition from the big companies doing installations to the DIY group, and now to a simple anybody can just plop down a couple panels and plug them in type thing. So it's kind of cool to see that. I did want to get into a couple of other big items, and I try to save these for these I don't really consider as much news as the little ones. I like the ones that really affect us, the DIY group, but I did want to go over a couple of them. It looks like the UK has greenlight its biggest solar farm yet. It's 700 million watts. This farm will power 300,000 homes. That is a huge solar farm. So that's basically, they've got this massive commitment to completely being zero. What do you want to call it? Zero pollutants or whatever it is, and so they are really pushing for it hard. But that is one big solar farm. For me, this isn't so much about that. It's great that we're helping the earth and all that kind of stuff, but for me, really, it's about the independence. I don't like the dependence on the grid, and you'll hear me say that when I come into some of the opinions about some of the things that we cover. It's not so much that, one of the other ones was that, and if I remember, it's kind of buried down here in the news somewhere. There was another company that had enabled, and which one was it? They had enabled a complete countrywide on-grid conversion. I don't even remember where I read it. But to me, that isn't as big news as us getting the batteries and stuff. Because the problem is you're still relying on the grid. And when the grid goes down, you still don't have power or backup power as long as you're using the grid to feed the power to and then give it back to you later. Now, overall, is it good? Yeah, it's good, but it takes out the reliance on the takes out the reliance and that kind of thing from my perspective. So for me, it's more about being able to hurricane comes, or just simply unplug and not have to worry about having grid power, cabins out in the middle of nowhere, or just doing whatever I want and using whatever power I want, not having to worry about it. That's more what it's about for me. So that's kind of where we are with the news. I haven't looked over here at the chat or anything. Let's see. Um, so I hope everyone has had a good week. Things have finally started to stop raining here. I know I showed you guys last week all of the different rain that we had going on. It was horrible. We had lots and lots of water around here. I had a couple of ducks come visit me and live in my front yard for a while, feeding off at the bottom of the pond that formed in my front yard. They were feeding off of the bird seed that was there. So that was kind of, at least I had the ducks, but I had a lot of cabin fever. So this week I've spent a lot of time prepping for new things coming out, and I'm glad to bring you guys a couple of items for the inverters this week. So what I really want to get into is this isn't going to be a hands-on where we actually connect these, but what I do want to do is I want to open up the panels and I want to walk through all the different connections. We'll open up the manual, we'll read through what these items contain, what they're good for, where you can use them and where you can't use them. There are links down below. They are affiliate links for me, so if you're interested in purchasing one of these, I've got some affiliate links down there for Signature Solar for both the 6000XP that you see here and the EG4 3000. The main difference between these two is when you think of an inverter, you think of this, and I apologize for the color of this if this is not coming across in the broadcast out there. This is actually yellow, and it's commonly referred to as the Pikachu unit because it's yellow and it looks a lot like Pikachu. But that was the problem that I was dealing with before I started the live stream, and I apologize. I wasn't able to resolve it. Apparently, the green screens that we have that are back here, which I could probably show you what that looks like. Let's see if I can do that. I probably can. Let me see if I can get a view here of what it would look like if I didn't have the green screens on. So this is, well, maybe I can't show you. So anyway, either way, I've got so many filters on now, I don't even know where to change the configuration. I don't want to break anything. So I'm just going to leave it the way it is and let you guys deal with it. So I want to go through the real differences here, and I'm going to stand up here and walk over and grab some manuals for these two. Both of these come with a bunch of different cables and manuals and different plugs and stuff, and we can talk about some of them. But really what I want to do is go through these are going to be the two main things that you're looking for when you're looking for an inverter. You're usually looking for either something of the 120 volt variety, which this has got 3,000 watts, 120 volts. And then the 6000 XP is a 240 volt split phase unit, meaning that it is very much like your house where you have an L1 and an L2, which are two 3,000 watt inverters running in sync together to provide 240 volts or to provide 110 on either leg. So these are your typical, there's a lot of brands that produce, I just happen to have these coming up for the Solar Sheds upgrade, and I'd ordered them and they came in, and I thought, wouldn't it be really cool to kind of just walk through all the details of really what the core differences is between the EG4 3000 and the EG4 6000XP. Now, I have opened up both of the insides of these, or at least loosened the screws, and let me just show you kind of where you can see on these sides here and down along the bottom there's just a couple of screw holes, and I've just loosened those screws up so that these panels come right off. And I'm just going to take this panel off and this panel off, and feel free, if you have questions in the comments, feel free to post any questions you have, and I'll hopefully catch them and be able to go over there and do that. The nice thing about these units, and if I look at the 3000, this one is very user-friendly, very, if you're new to inverters and stuff, it has all the rubber garments already in it. Now, I have never connected the 3000 before. I've done the 6000 XP and I've done tons of other inverters. I ordered this one specifically to do an upgrade on the solar shed to allow for us to walk together through this. So for me, some of the information that's in here today will be a little bit new also, but that's what makes it kind of fun. I've never even seen one in person until I opened this one earlier today. I took it fresh out of the box and had to take the screws. This one only had 2 little screws on the side and a very small panel. Now, what it kind of reminded me of, for those of you who watch the show, I noticed that I had a very similar nature of, very much looks a lot like the eco-worthy one that I worked on for the solar shed, for the 12-volt solar shed. Now, this is a 48-volt system. Both of these are 48-volt systems. There are no 12 volts. There are no 24-volt variations of these. Both of these are 48-volt systems. But this one really reminded me of it, as the compartments are a little bit tighter. Although I will say, and I think I can show you, let me see if I can get this to work. I have a phone view that I can control here, and if I can get this to work correctly, what I'll do is I will, yeah, that works. Let me just walk over there and show you. I'm going to fade this in. There we go. And I'm going to take this phone over here, and I'm going to have to turn this computer a little bit so I can see what I'm actually showing you. But you can see here from this, I wish this phone would preview this for me. These are really nice connectors, nice sized hold connectors here. So you open these up, and those, see if I can find me a screwdriver, and I will show you those here in a little bit. But the same thing's true with the power outlet here. If you're coming out, let me see if I can get that view where you can see it. Sorry about this, trying to figure out how, there we go. So down in this hole here, the power feeds in this hole over here, and it goes into screw clamps like this inside, which is really nice. These are really large, and they're very good. They're very good climbing around trying to make things work, make things better for you here. But you can see here, these are really nice clips. Now we get over in the 6000 XP, and you can see here on the loads, which is the L1s and the L2s for the 120 volt side, we have nice breakers, which will save you a fortune in connection fees. And then this is new. When I originally bought a 6000 XP, these were screw caps also. And you would put the wires in and you'd screw it down. These are like quick locks where you flip them up and the wires go in and you clamp them down. Now when I upgraded, when I did the warranty work on my 6000 XP, you'll notice I comment about these new screw clamps here, where you just put the PV wire in and click it closed, and boom, it clamps right on. And they work really well and make this very, very convenient. Then you can see down here the neutral bus bars and the PE. And we're going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail, but I did want to show you each one of them here. So this is the battery connections, and there's a bag of parts. And then, of course, the battery breaker is a 200 amp breaker here for that. And then you have all your dry ports connections. You can use these for turning things off and on. And for those of you who follow the channel, you've probably seen where I've gone in and configured these to turn on the charge inverter to charge things up. And then, of course, the communication ports. And we can get into the communication ports and how you can hook these up in parallel if you're interested in more than one type, or more than one inverter, or more power than one inverter can actually allow you to have. So I'm going to switch this back here. So as you can see, just from the brief view there of that it is pretty simple set of configurations. Now, we can walk through some of the aspects of this, and like I said, if anyone's having any questions or anything, feel free to let me know what they are, and I'll be glad to go through those. I see we have lots of people online, but no questions yet, so that's good. Either I'm explaining it really well, or you simply don't have any questions. So let's start walking through. Let's start off with the Pikachu EG4 6000, and I think the letters on this, and if you look in the description, there is the actual EHN, I think they call it, 3000 EHN, or it's a 3000 is basically all I call it. It's the EG4 3000. This inverter is 120 volts and 3000 watts. Now, unlike a lot of the inverters out there, these are both what I would consider all-in-ones. And what I mean by all-in-one is that not only do they provide you with an inverter, but they also provide you with a PV input and a charger to hook up to AC. So you've got all three worlds that you get to go into. Charging from PV, charging from regular wall outlets, and you also have your inverter, and they're all 48 volts. So both of them have that in common. Now, there are some big distinctions between what this one is basically, the biggest distinction is the 110 volts or the 120 volts versus the 240 volts. But we can kind of get into that as we discuss it. Let's start off by going through each of the connections that we have over here in this. And I think we've got a pretty decent, I'm going to make this my little screen a little bit bigger so I can see what I'm showing you guys. Turn this off. There we go. Okay. So these connections over here are where you're going to spend a lot of your time. So you have AC in, which is basically ground, line, and neutral are your first three plugs. So this is where you would take a cord, and a lot of people that I've seen this happens on, if you're connecting this in an RV or you're connecting this on in a shed or something, they'll basically just take an extension cord that you can just either buy at Home Depot, or you can just cut them off of some old device that you have, run it up in here and run the connections in here. It is extremely important that this ground is connected here, so that you have the proper grounding to the unit to keep you safe. So please don't skip that on that, because this is the only real source of grounding, unless you have taken this unit and ground tied it to a copper spike in the ground and using a grounding rod and properly done it that way. My suggestion is that you do use the ground from here, or you do the grounding rod to ensure safety on these. So the next one is your AC out. Now this is on the 3000. This is a major distinction between the 6000 XP and the 3000. Is the output of this one is very simple. You have basically a line and a neutral. Just like you would have in a normal outlet plug at home, you basically have just a live wire and a neutral wire, which is your feed your power out, you feed your power back in through here. And then you have PV, which is PV plus and PV minus, so you have one PV. And I am not sure of the actual PV input. Let's take a look at the user manual, and I can tell you what the PV input was. So it is the 3000 EHV48, which is basically the model number that I was trying to come up with earlier. Let's see, we have, go through and find that. So usually there's a spec page in here that makes it really easy to understand what the output is on these. Okay, so the PV input is 5,000 volts, excuse me, 500 volts. 500 volts DC comes in through this. And now the question becomes, how much from that does it need to run? If I remember correctly, it will be running A minimum of 100, and this is the big thing when it comes to 48-volt chargers, is a lot of them require a minimum voltage in order to operate. And on this one, it is no exception. It says here on page 9 of the manual, and if you're interested in one of these inverters, you can easily go out and just say EG4 6000 manual, and there's a PDF that you can download right offline and take a look at this. These were pretty recent versions. This is version 1.3.0, and I imagine I just got these in a couple of weeks ago, so I don't imagine that these manuals are very old. But the nice thing about EG4 is as new features are added, as you do your firmware upgrades, as you do that, they always put out new manuals and make them available to you online. They don't make you jump through a whole bunch of hoops. You don't have to go in and put your credentials in and emails and sign up for this and that. Just go search it online and boom, it'll pop right up and you can find the most recent version. That is one of the really nice things. And Signature Solar, if you follow the links down below, you go to Signature Solar's website, they will have a spot there for the manual also, and you can easily grab a copy of it there. But I am on page 9 of the EG4 3000 inverter, and on this I am looking at the specs here about the solar charging mode, and it takes in a maximum of 500 volts DC, but it does have an operating voltage between 120 volts and 450 volts. Now, on the 6000 XP, it is very, very similar in nature for charging. The only real difference is the Pikachu has one MPPT charger and the 6000 XP has two. So you do have two feeds on the 6000 XP here, where you can feed the PV in from two independent strings, or you can tell it to combine those strings for a single string. So I am going to assume, and it doesn't, I haven't found it yet, but let's see if we can find it here. I would assume that the maximum PV is 4,000 watts, but it may be the full 8,000 coming in from a single string. Maximum amperage recommended Babley. It's very strange that it doesn't just list it. Maximum input, maximum current. Oh, 18 amps. Well, let's see if we can just do the math here. Let me just find out. Don't know why it wouldn't just say it. Just the spec sheet should just say, yeah, 8,000. That's not way more than I would expect it to be. It has a couple of things here about series and panels. I'm really surprised that it doesn't just say, like I said, I have never installed this one before, and usually specs like this are something that's readily available, so I'm kind of surprised. Let's see if I can just hunt it down real quick. If anyone out there knows the answer, feel free to post it, but we're looking at the here we go, 3000, the EG4 3000 EV8 inverter charge spec sheet. And here's what I'll do. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to pull this up on the screen here, and then I'm going to show you guys what I'm looking at and show you how easy it is to find things about this this inverter. So I'm going to switch this over here to screen capture. That looks good. Yep. Okay. So there you go. So you can see, oh, and you can see my green screen there. So what I was looking for before. The scan code that's on the screen is also available. It just takes you to my website for those of you watching on TV. If you're interested, you can go there. But I'm going to go over here to Signature Solar's PDF where they have the spec sheet. surprised the manual doesn't have 3,000 watts continuous output, which we talked about, parallel up to 12 units, single phase. So you can connect 12 of these together to get 12 times 300, gets you a ton of power, and it also allows you to do split phase or three phase if you parallel them up together. It is extremely light. This whole thing is only 18 pounds, which is kind of nice. It's not anywhere near as heavy as the 6000 XP, so if you're looking for something for a small RV or a trailer or something like that, it's really good there. I've thought about even using this in the coffee trailer using with a 48 volt, so I can run the coffee pots and that kind of stuff with it. So that would be kind of nice. Going down a little bit further, see if we can find the maximum rated output. I can't believe, there it is. All right, rated power, solar input specifications, 5,000 watts. Okay, so that's what we were looking for. It's 5,000 watts. So it does have to be, as you can see here under this specification, that it has to be between 120 volts to 450 volts DC, and then it can accept up to 5,000 watts of total power. So it's an 80 amp charger at 48 volts, and that is it's actually very significant, very big, because that would be a really large set of panels. And if you were running these in parallel, that would mean that every one that you add to the parallel, instead of 3,000 watts, you would have 6,000 watts of output, but you would also have double the input for charging. You'd go from 5,000 watts to 10,000 watts of charging. Now, the nice thing about that is that charging is more than you can output. Therefore, you could have enough solar panels to run all of your devices and still charge at 2,000 watts, even if you were running it at max power. Now, a lot of inverters, we will tell you that most of them, a lot of the ones on the market, don't really perform as the specs provide. Both of these, and I know for firsthand the 6000 XP, and I have also heard about the 3000, they use a lot of these for running well pumps and stuff. They will both perform at full capacity. I run my 6000 XP practically every morning. I hit the coffee pot, my wife's coffee pot, and my espresso machine, and when the hot water heater all hit at the same time, those three running at the same time, it runs my L1 runs right at 3,100 watts, and it does perform on the L1 at 3,100 watts. So it will run the full 6,000 watts on both balanced out, if it's balanced out properly. That is very rare in inverters. A lot of them will report 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 watts, and then you're told to leave a massive buffer because they can't perform. Both of these units, as I understand firsthand with the 6,000, but also with the 3,000, they will perform that way. They do perform, and the surge capacity is fantastic. If you look at the surge capacity over here on the spec sheet, you can see that the surge capacity for this one is probably, where did it go? 3,000, pure sine wave, 6,000 for 5 seconds. So it can handle a really good surge, being even if you're sitting right at the edge of the, sitting at 2,000, you have 1,000 watts something starting up, but it needs 5,000 to start. It can handle that, get it started, and then run on. So that's really good. And so this is a really nice unit for anything that you have that needs less than 3,000. It's reliable. It's got years and years of in-service reputation to go with it. You won't find a bad word about it. If I take you over to the Signature Solar website, which I think we're still broadcasting this, so I can just take you right over to the Signature Solar website and show you the price on this one. So I like the off-grid, as we've talked about before. I like the off-grid inverters because they provide me the most flexibility of that. But you can see here, the 6000 XP is currently listed at $1,549, and the 3000 is at $699. So theoretically, if you had two of these, it would be a little cheaper than having one of these, and it would provide some ability for emergency if one went out or something like that. In all reality, the warranty on these is really wonderful. And when I had a problem with my 6000 XP, they knew that I was partially still operating. They shipped the unit out to me while I was still using one unit, and then when I replaced the unit one day, which there's a video out there about that warranty replacement, I replaced it and shipped the other one back, and they took care of the warranty that way. So it really was nice of them to make sure that they managed that really well. But you can see that the prices on these are $699 or $700 for the Pikachu, and $1,549 for the 6000 XP. So let's talk a little bit about the 6000 XP. And you can see from the 6000 XP here that I'm going to switch this screen back to the inverter view so you can see what we've got going on here. So the 6000 XP, there we go. That was me. The 6000 XP has its battery connections here. Now, what I like about the 6000 XP is that the battery connections here, unlike the 3000 which are down here, these are nice and lugs, but this is only a 3000 watt unit. Because this one has such a much larger thing, you do have these large lugs that you can put on here, so you use good sized cables and lugs with bolts and stuff instead of these screw clamps. The only thing I don't like about the screw clamps is over time these have, and in most cases it's not an issue because you hook them up, you configure them, and then you're pretty much done with it, and it sits there for years, and you just have to go out and check it to make sure they stay tight and make sure that you don't have problems. With me, a lot of the times I'm building systems and I take them back apart and then I put them back together for another system, and this ends up being problematic in the sense that these screw things have a tendency to wear over time, especially with a large amount of usage. So that's why I like the lugs that you have here with the 6000. Yes, you have to build the cables. Yes, you have to make sure that you have good lugs and make sure you have good connections and stuff like that. But these connections will last for a very long time, even if you're taking them off and putting them on. Not to mention, they can handle a lot more power, and it's very easy for me to get a thermal camera on these to determine if there's something going wrong in this area, whereas this is very difficult for me to put a thermal camera down there and determine is my connection good or is it not good. And so that is why I really like this with the 6000 XP. But not everybody needs a 240 volt split phase unit. This one, if you have two, you can run it in split phase, and if you have three, you can run it in three-phase power. Same with this. You put three of them together, you can run in three-phase power also. But if you don't have a need for 240 split phase or three phase, then you can just have additional 120 volt power on this. Now, I've actually considered in my coffee trailer where I do operate normally on a 240 split phase, but I'm constantly attempting to balance between coffee pots and stuff. I've thought about actually putting two of these in parallel, getting the 6,000 watt 120 volt system, and just that would allow it to balance itself, and I wouldn't have to worry about having an L1 and an L2 like I would with a 6000 XP. So let's talk a little bit about the 6000 XP and some of the features that it has. We've gone through a few of them, but there's a lot of here that is a big cost savings from what you'll have over here. For example, let's talk about, we have breakers on this one. So when you go out and you hook this one up, you do have the connections here for it, but you have no breakers. So this will need to run to a breaker so that you can turn the power off and on and connect it. You're not going to want to just run it off and let the wire just hang there. So you're going to need to hook up some breakers to it. So this one comes with the breakers, and you have three types of power here. So you have, this one only has the input for AC. Now that input, it needs to be clean power. It can't be dirty power. So if you're going to be charging with a generator, you need to make sure that it is an inverter generator that will run. Like I use a Predator 9000 for my food truck. I think it's a 9500, and it has good clean power, and it can run these and charge perfectly. So I know the Predators from Harbor Freight will do it perfectly, and I'm pretty sure most of the clean power inverters with less than 3% less than 3% of the harmonic disruptions will be just fine. Then you have on the 6000XP, you have not only do you have the regular grid feed, but you also have a generator feed, which is a separate feed here, allowing you to use the dry contacts to turn on a generator when you need to do it. Now, the generator will need, this is one of the biggest things that I have heard people complain about is, first of all, the input for these, the generator has to be clean power. You can't just hook up some old, $700, 7,000 watt generator with some dirty power and run it in here. If you have the charge verter, that's a different story, and that would be what I would suggest if you're going to be charging from a generator anyway. You're not going to want to run that through here. When you run through the generator through here, it actually has to be able to power the loads and charge. And that means that it's going to operate basically just like the grid as the generator. So in my mind, I think they kind of made a mistake here when they designed this. They should have built what they had on the charge verter into this, what am I trying to say here? Into this generator port and allowed you to put dirty power in it, because technically there is no difference between these two other than you have to flip one switch inside the software to get this one to run as opposed to one switch to get that one to run. But functionally, they're very much the same, with the exception of this has some triggers. It automatically falls back to this when the power goes out and things like that. And this has some dry contacts where you can turn it on and things like that. But in reality, the basic functionality from my perspective is that they are very similar in nature to each other, and it was kind of a mistake on their part. I think they should have increased the cost of a couple $100 on the 6000XP, took the technology of the charge verter and built it into this device, and it would have made this device that much better. Both of these devices have wonderful reputations, so don't get me wrong, but as important it is for me to point out all the positives, it's also just as important for me to point out the negatives of it. And that is one that, in my mind, if I'm going to hook up a generator, to be honest with you, I take the generator, I plug it in my RV, I plug it into the same input that I put the grid, and I just tell it to do a charge. I don't even use the generator port in that sense. It's just kind of a waste in my mind. They could have done a much better job. The third breaker here is the load. This is where you feed your panel. And what a lot of people do is they will, in a home, they will use this to have an emergency panel, or to offload some of what they have in their main breaker box, pull some of those circuits out and put them in a new breaker box, and that allows you to run these on solar all the time. And then if you have, when the grid goes out, then you can have these circuits still run in solar, and your big circuits, your problematic ones that you don't want to run on solar. For example, if you don't want to run your hot water heater, or you don't want to run big devices like that, your dryer or your stove, those three big power hungry devices, then it allows you to feed it into a separate circuit. That's a very common connection with this, because the power output of this is very similar to what you would have in a house. Now, one thing that's really big distinction to note between these, because it's very, very common for people that I've been working with, especially recently, is they're hooking up mini splits. Now, There is a big difference in which one of these you're going to want if you're looking at hooking up a mini split. A lot of the mini splits on the market are 240 volts, and they are 240 volts because they are much more efficient at 240 volts. Much more is a relative term. They are more efficient. Let me reword that. And that means that if you are looking to do a mini split, having a 240 volt mini split run at 10 amps is much better than having a 20 amp 120 volt mini split. And the reason being is exactly the same amount of power is being used, but you're going to get more efficiency and more cooling out of the 240 volt one. This will allow you to run 240 volt units. The only upside and downside to that is that you have to think of this as having two Pikachu units inside it. And the reason you have to think of it that way is because on the output here with this breaker, you'll notice here it's labeled an L1 and an L2. Now, L1 and L2 means that you have a load 1 and a load 2. And that would be basically the equivalent of the load that you have over here for one Pikachu unit, and then the L2 would be a second Pikachu unit. Now, the only difference is that you can use them in conjunction to do 220 volt devices, that being your mini split, that being an air conditioner, that being some window units are 220 volts. That doesn't mean that you can't run 110, but it does mean you have to consider the possibility that you don't have 6,000 watt pull to work from, where you just say, I'm going to use 4,000 watts, okay, this is going to work. If it's 4,000 watts on one car lift motor or air compressor or something like that that you need, this can't provide an ongoing 4,000 watts. It can provide 4,000 watts split over two separate lines, meaning 2,000 off of this one and 2,000 off of this one, or 3,000 off of this one and 3,000 off of this one, adding up to 6,000 watts. But it can't do it all on one line. If you want to do it all on one line, then you will have to have two of these run in parallel. And that is where you would take these, and in parallel you would connect these to each other, and you will see, I haven't gotten to this part yet, but let me show it to you. On the side here, you have communication ports. I think you can see that. Let me just make sure. Yeah. So on the side here, you have communication ports, and on the bottom here, you'll notice that you have RS-232, you have RS-485, you have dry contact, you have an off-on switch, and you have an internal input breaker. So this one has some of the communication pieces to talk with your batteries and stuff, but it also has the communication ports to link these together. And instead of having one unit in 3,000 watts, you can have two units for 6,000 watts. Now, that you would be able to have a pool of 6,000 watts, and you could have a device that was using 4,000 watts all from one 120 volt line. This, you wouldn't be able to do that. Keep in mind, this is like having two Pikachu units running separately. They can work together to do 240 volts, but they can't be blended. There's no way to configure them to be blended to where there is no balancing of those two lines. In other words, if you pull over 3,000 watts on one line, let's say you pull at, and I would say 3,100, but it's not at 3,100, it actually will run it. But if you pulled 3,400 watts off of L1, this unit will shut down and switch over to grid mode and do an automatic bypass for you. Now, the one thing that it does do really well, and from my understanding is so does the 3000, is it does do really fast switching back and forth between your line. I have never even noticed it switching between my grid and my solar. So for example, in the morning, if I have the hot water heater, the coffee pot, and the espresso machine all going, I'm sitting right there at that 3000 line, and everything's really nice and key. And occasionally my wife will say, "Oh, I want a cup of coffee," and she'll stick the microwave on, and boom. If I'm plugged into the grid, I don't even notice that it happened. But what will happen is the 6000 XP will automatically go into bypass mode because it can't provide the power that's been requested. It will pull the power from the grid, switch everything over seamlessly, where you won't even notice that it happened. And then after a minute or two of recognizing, hey, the power needs have dropped below the 3000 limit again on both L1 and L2, then it will switch back seamlessly and you won't even know it happened. The first time it happened, I found it in a log 3 weeks after it had happened, didn't even know that it had happened. Now, occasionally, just for kicks, I'll test it to see if it happens. Now, here is the thing. If I am running off-grid, meaning I don't have the grid hooked up, because keep in mind, mine is hooked up in an RV, and there is a lot of things you have to consider going off-grid with an all-in-one inverter. If you're truly looking to do an off-grid setup for your RV or something, you might even look at something like Victron, which has the proper certifications for mobile devices. But as long as you do hook them up correctly, make sure you follow the manual on how to handle them and how to hook them up correctly. If you, when you are off-grid and it goes over the 3000 and it attempts to go into bypass mode, it does shut the unit down temporarily. And then in a few minutes later, it will come back online. Now, when it shuts down, it's very abrupt. You're there, everything's going fine, and then all of a sudden, click, the power goes out and you lose everything. Then a few minutes later, it comes back on, it resets, and everything goes back to normal. Now, if your load is still over, then of course it's going to shut back off again. Now, I've never seen that happen because a lot of the times when that happens, things like the coffee pot don't just automatically come back on, or things like the hot water heater would come back on automatically. The microwave doesn't start itself back up. So usually that's enough to solve the problem, even if I'm not around. And then obviously I don't want to leave my wife in a situation where she has no power. So it is nice to know that it does reset itself. The alternative to that is just make sure you have a grid as backup, and then you don't have to worry about it. But it's worth noting that what happens when you do go over. Now, a lot of inverters will do that. They will shut down when you overfeed. The nice thing about this, even though it is an off-grid inverter, is that it will switch to bypass mode for the grid. Now, one thing of note for both of these is when you go to charge from the grid, you can't just say, continue using solar power over here and charge over here. All the power has to come from a single location. And the reason being is that the device has to have special switches and stuff to be able to stop the power from backfeeding onto the grid and stuff. And therefore, either all the power comes in from the grid or all the power comes in from the battery, but you can't have it do both ways. You can't have the inverter generating power and the grid providing power. Now, there are some inverters that do that, and the devices to prevent power from backfeeding to the grid are a little bit more expensive and a little bit. You look at the Grid Boss and the Flex Boss, and those EG4 products will allow you to supplement the power coming in from the grid. In other words, you can use 3000 watts from here and supplement an extra 1000 watts from the grid to make your device run. But on the 6000 XP, that does not exist. It is either all generator, all grid, or all battery. And if you go into charge mode from the grid, then it will switch all of your devices that are operating into bypass mode and do your charge independently. And so that's just something to note that does that. Now, in addition to the AC, let's talk a little bit about the DC side of things, because on any inverter, you're going to have the AC side of things where you're providing 120 volts of AC or you're providing 240 volts of AC. But you've also got to consider on the DC side of things, what do you need on this side to make it safe, and to um, what is the inverter, and these are considered all-in-one inverters. What are they providing you? Over here, you have the inputs for your batteries coming in. Again, you have a breaker here for your DC voltage coming in from your batteries. So it has a maximum of 200 amp breaker here. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't want to put a breaker on each of your batteries. I breaker each of my batteries. Fortunately, my EG4 batteries came with breakers. I have a DIY battery that I also built built into my RV. It has a T-class fuse on it to do it. And then I have an inline A&L fuse that basically acts as a fuse as opposed to a breaker for this halfway between the breaker, the battery bank, and the inverter. So I really fuse mine in three different places, breaker or fuse in three different places. At the start of the start of the feed, the end of the feed, and the middle of the feed. And for me, that is the way that I always try to think of it, is you want to do it where the power is starting, where the power is ending. Now, in the case of, especially in the case of DC, you can't really think of it as starting and ending. It's starting if I'm charging, it's starting if I am using. So in this case, it's either starting on the charging the battery or starting in the use of the battery. And then you have in the middle, and what I fuse there is between the batteries all being hooked into a bus bar, and then I fuse that bus bar going to the rest of the system, whether it's going to the inverter, whether it's going to a 48 volt converter to go for DC 12 volt power for the lights and stuff in the RV, whether it's going to run a Starlink or whatever the other use of that 48 volt. I breaker off or fuse off everything on the battery side of things so that each one's independently fused. The battery bank itself is individually fused, and then the inverters are also individually have breakers on them. Okay, so on the DC side of things over on this side, on the 6000XP, you not only do you have the lugs and the large connections, but you also have the breaker for those batteries coming in to keep you to, it makes it very convenient to shut this down and to work on it because everything is built in. In addition to that, on the PV side of things, you also have the PV shutoff here. So this allows you to shut your PV off, thus killing everything past this circuit here, the same as you would with a breaker here, or the same as you would with these breakers here. This isn't a substitute for a PV shut off at where you have your panels or anything like that. I still have those, but it is a very nice, convenient way of shutting the system down, and one more safety feature to make sure that you've got everything turned off and not active. So when I work on these, I shut the shut off switch in my RV. I have in a separate compartment. I have all of my PV go through there. That has a shut off switch. I have a shut off switch if I have alternate power coming in from like the solar shed. I have a shut off switch in the solar shed. Not only that, I have the fuses at the solar shed because I fused at the source of the power. Then I have the switch over here and the breaker over here to pop this. So that is the nice thing about the 6000XP, is that it comes with all of the breakers and all of the shutoffs built in, and unfortunately the 3000 does not. Now, the size of the breakers for this are considerably smaller than 6,000 watts on this side. So, but it is something to consider when you're doing it. It does come with generator dry contacts and also power for 12 volt powering of generators, and a couple of different dry contacts that you can configure these to turn on at different charging times, or you can configure them to turn on if power gets to a certain not temperature, if it gets down to a certain voltage, or if it gets to a certain state of charge, depending on how you're running your system. I have ran them in both the state of charge where I connect the batteries in, because you have a communication port here, the same as you have the communication ports down here. And these can connect to the batteries and give you the state of the charge of the batteries directly from the battery. You can also run it off of what they call open loop, which is basically looking at the voltage of the batteries that are there. Now, originally, I ran mine from state of charge through the communication ports, and it allows you to control turning on the generator and turning on certain things and trigger things based on state of charge. You can also run it in open loop mode, and then you can do it based on voltage. I personally prefer the voltage because of some of the restrictions that many consider to be annoying. For example, one of the annoying things that I think about the 6000 XP that I'm not sure I understand why they did it is that the state of charge going into end of day mode. And what I mean by end of day mode is you have to set the end of day mode saying that if the battery goes below a certain amount, it switches over to either bypass or turns off the inverter to preserve everything. Now, in the old days when you had lead acid batteries and stuff, that was very important to be able to preserve your battery and say, look, don't let me discharge past this point. In the case of lithium batteries, if I'm out in the middle of nowhere and I need to run my batteries down to 0% in order to make it through the night, then that's what I wanted to do. Unfortunately, with the state of charge method, I'm not allowed to do that. It automatically has shutoffs that are set in there for end of day mode and for disconnect mode, as opposed to run until you can't run anymore. With open loop, I can run until I don't run anymore. I can tell it automatically start charging at 46 volts, 47 volts, 48 volts, or wherever I want to put that charge at, as opposed to the fixed 10% that's set for end of day mode in the configuration, where I don't have any control over it. I'm hoping that someday they'll lessen that type of a configuration and let us configure it. But to this day, they still are still controlling that. So you'd have over here 3 different ports. There's actually 5 different ports. 2 of them are capped off. I know that one of these, based on some internet videos that I watched, does connect to the RS485 ports and stuff over here, but that's got to be unofficial because they are capped off. It is not in the manual, and it's just that if you trace it on the board, you can find out that it does go to the port over here. So the 3 ports that you have over here are basically combine the 2 that you've got here and the 1 that you've got down here. The first one on the very far right is the battery communication port, which is the same as this one here. You plug this in, and they do provide you with a couple of cables, and I'm going to show you these cables. So these are still in the package. I haven't even opened them up, but you can see here, this is a communication cable to go to another inverter. I believe this is the inverter one. No, this is the battery communication. So this would basically plugs in here, and then you plug this into the battery, and then the batteries can plug into each other, and that's the 480, the RS, called RS485, which for those of you who've been around in the computer world for a while, it's very similar to an RS232 type communication, but it's all the batteries, they all communicate, and they all connect to each other, and they report their status back to this. The standard, there's a basic standard for RS485. There is no fixed permanent standard at this point. So you will have to set the inverter to the battery type that you have. There are several that are very common. The pylon protocol is very common. If you're using the EG4 batteries, you can set them to the EG4. There are types, lots of them that are very common. But today, still, with the state of charge communications, the market really hasn't, and I don't know if it's out of greed, if it's out of just confusion, or if it's just out of them being stubborn and not wanting to work together. I would have thought that it would have been easier to come up with one standard to say, here's the battery communication protocol and we all use it. But it seems that every time they do that and they come up with one that seems to be the fairly common, it doesn't have everything that another one wants in order to run their batteries. So they alter it a little bit, and thus you end up with 1,000 different variations and 1,000 different ones. There are a few that are very common, don't get me wrong. Pylon is one of them, and you can hook up the eco-worthy batteries through that communication. You can also switch use that communication with the EG4 batteries going to a solar assistant. So that protocol is very common. They're all RS-485, but they're not all compatible with each other, which brings up the problem of plugging this battery into that brand battery into that brand battery. Now you end up with, you've got 2 or 3 different variations and they won't communicate with each other, and you're back to the same problem of either all the batteries have to be the same or they all have to be compatible with each other. Believe it or not, this problem is really rampant at this point. Whereas even within EG4, their own batteries, you will see people out there complaining about, how do I hook the old version 1 batteries to the version 2 LiFePO batteries, to the new wall mount batteries, to the internal batteries, to the external batteries. It's kind of sad that they haven't devised a method to which to honor variations of this protocol through the next few years. What's amazing is that we can have internet browsers that can read HTML files from 10 years ago and it still work, but we can plug in a battery that we paid thousands of dollars for and they can't talk to each other. It's kind of silly when you think about it in those terms. But just know that there is a protocol that needs to be configured within the 6000XP's configuration to tell it the type of batteries that you're going on. You'll have to identify the batteries with different little switches. The little switches will allow you to configure, this is battery 1, this is battery 2, this is battery 3, this is battery 4, and then they all communicate back to this, and this knows that you've got 4 batteries, it knows what size they are, and it knows what the state of charge of each one is, and thus can keep track of the state of charge of the entire bank. I use a little bit different form when I added my DIY battery. I switched to open loop, which basically means I don't worry about any of these communications here. I completely disconnected this, and I told this to run off of the battery voltage. So everything that I do is based on battery voltage. When the battery voltage gets down to 48 volts, it automatically switches over to grid mode and charges it to the battery voltage gets to 52 volts or whatever I've got it set to at the time. This allows me to control when I automatically switch to this. Instead of it switching on at 10%, it switches on usually somewhere around 2 or 3%. If I don't have grid, well, then the battery is going to run down and shut off when the inverter can no longer use the voltage that's there, and when the power comes back on, it would automatically start to charge back up, thus allowing me to use the entire battery, not getting me stuck in some hurricane with 10% of my investment sitting over there that I can't use to run the lights. So then the next 2 ports on here are what they call parallel ports, and you'll notice you have 2 of them over here and you have 2 of them here. These are basically the same as the battery connections, but they connect additional units to each other. So if you wanted to, let's say that 6,000 watts, 3,000 on L1 and 3,000 on L2 is not enough, or 3,000 watts for just 120 volts is not enough. You can hook these up in parallel. So I could put down a second 6000 XP and I could connect the parallel port, which is this cable here. And I believe this one is actually a standard network cable. It's labeled COM, parallel COM cable, but I think it actually is just a standard network cable. I haven't confirmed that recently. But this, you basically plug into this here, and it runs to the next one, and the next one runs to the next one, and the next one runs to the next one, and then one of them runs back to this, and it creates a loop of these and allows it to synchronize the power coming out, the frequency of the power coming out with AC. One big difference between AC and DC power. DC power is common across the world. It's around all battery DC power is the same DC power. There's different voltages, but it's all the same. It's just a constant 100% direct current all the time at 12 volts, at 24 volts, at 48 volts. There is no surprises. AC current is very different in the sense that it has a frequency, meaning that it switches between going one direction and going the other. And the easiest way to explain it, and I'm sure there'll be some electrician that comes online that contradicts this, and I'm okay with that. I welcome it. If you are an electrician and you want to contradict that, please do so. I'm trying to switch over to my chat window so I can see if I'm missing anything there. But the AC current switches back and forth in what they call a frequency. And it's a frequency of switching. Here we use 50 hertz, which basically means 50 times a second it switches between the power flowing this way and the power flowing this way. So the power, in my mind, and this is the way I visualize it, is it takes the power takes the I'm going to unravel this cord so I can kind of give you an idea of how I envision it. It may not be 100% accurate, and keep in mind I am not an electrician, and if there is anything that you see here that you're uncomfortable with, I suggest that you contact an electrician. I am no substitute for an electrician. I'm showing you what I have done and how I can't undo this stupid tie here. There it goes. All right, so the way I envision AC power is that the power is flowing in this direction for DC. This is the battery on this side. This is the device that's using it. The power starts here, and it just comes in a steady stream like a flow of water down this pipe to this end, and this end uses it. AC power is a little bit different. AC power used both sides of the connection, and the power flows in both directions. It flows this way, and it flows back this way. And so for half of the time, the power flows this way, and then the other half of the time, the power flows this way, and it changes 60 or 50 times a second here in the US and 60 times a second in the rest of the world. Yes, I know, we're Americans. We had to do it something different than everyone else. Sorry about that, the rest of the world. But that is the way, it's because that power is flowing back and forth. When you hook these inverters in parallel, what you're essentially doing is aligning that flow back and forth so that they're all talking at exactly the same speed, at exactly the same frequency, and they're doing it exactly in time together so that all the power pushes this way. What would happen if you don't do that is that you would have one inverter pushing this way and the other one pushing this way. And as you know, if you've ever been stuck in the middle of a water fight and one guy on this side has a water hose and the other guy on that side has a water hose and they both spray them towards you, you get clobbered in the middle. And the same thing would happen to your inverters if you plug them in and they're not in parallel. If they're not parallel together to communicate that frequency exactly the same. Now, one thing to understand about this is that's very similar in nature to what goes on when your inverter switches from grid power to battery power. So this inverter is theoretically, when you have the grid plugged in, and this is theoretically, probably not exactly, and maybe some EG4 technician will clarify it if I'm wrong, but I don't think so. It's pretty much the same for all of them. You are basically, this inverter is watching that grid's frequency and matching it so that if the power goes out, it can generate the same power for your devices in your house. If your battery gets low and it shuts off and goes to the grid, the frequency of those devices needs to be the same as the power that was there. And so it's watching that and monitoring it so that when it switches back and forth, they are basically matched and kept at the same frequency and kept going the same direction. Now, because they're not sharing the actual grid, in the case of this is an off-grid system. Now, on an on-grid system, the inverter would actually be producing energy on the same line as the power company, and thus allow the energy to flow back to the grid and flow back to you depending on how much you need it. If you used all the power and you made it to pull some from the grid, it would pull some from the grid. And because you're perfectly matched with frequency, if you didn't use it all in your house, then the rest could flow back out through the meter, back to the electric company, to the telephone pole. And if your neighbor was using extra power, it would go over there and your neighbor would get that extra power. And that's what makes on-grid or grid-tied systems so dangerous when the power goes off, and why they shut them off. Your inverter is designed, when it's grid-tied, to either A, isolate you from the outside world where you can't send power back out there because there's no grid, because the grid went off, so that you're not sending power to that electric line when somebody might be working on it, or B, basically shut down. And that's usually what happens on people who've gotten solar systems installed in their houses and they don't have batteries. And then they're surprised when the power goes off that theirs goes off also. And that's because there's no frequency there for it to match. Therefore, it doesn't generate any power, because you wouldn't want to generate the power, because all of that power would go out to the grid and you would try to power all your neighbors' houses and you wouldn't have enough power, and you could possibly electrocute the guy that's working on the telephone pole also. So there's a lot of complexities there. So those systems are designed to, as soon as the grid goes off, to shut the door and say, okay, no more power is allowed to come through this until I detect that the grid power is back and working again. Then I'm allowed to share power going back and forth in both directions. All right, that's not even sure how I got to that point. But as you can see, this is what these three plugs are for here. Is the on this one, the battery communication, which is here on the Pikachu unit. It's here on the 6000 XP. The parallel ports are here or here. The dry ports, you've only got one on this one, which is your generator port over here. You have several combinations here of 12-volt ports, of generator ports, of dry contacts where you can turn on relays and stuff like that. And anyone who's looked back through my old videos, I connect some dry relays to a 220 relay, which basically turns on power coming into my chargeverter and turns my chargeverter on based on a switch that I configure here. And I can configure Home Assistant to turn that switch off and on and stuff like that. That's a little bit outside the scope of this video, or outside of the scope of this live stream, but you get the point. The power connection is here for a 48-volt battery, which is the same on this one. It's over here. You've got the screw-down contacts here where you have lugs with bolts on this one. That is, in essence, because here you've got a lot larger battery needs. You also should be aware on the 6000 XP that the demand for power here is higher than a single battery can perform. So if you only get a single 100 amp hour battery, theoretically you cannot pull a full 6000, because a single 100 amp hour 48 volt battery could produce a maximum of 52 volts, let's say, times 100 amps, which would be 5,200 watts. So this would not allow you to output the full voltage if all you had was one battery. So that is another big difference that's presented. This one, you will be able to run the entire thing off of a single 48 volt 100 amp hour battery. This one, you will need a battery that can support more than that. It is suggested that you have a minimum of two. And that would mean that each one would be able to supply part of that power to this and give it full 6,000 watts of power. Okay. And therefore, you would connect this to a bus bar and the bus bar to multiple batteries, which is the same that I've done in the RV video. In my RV, is this connects to a bus bar. The bus bar connects to three EG4 100 amp hour batteries and one 304 amp DI or 304 amp hour DIY battery. Okay, then you have the load power, which is the same as over here. You have the two clamps here for the load, You have the L1, L2, and your neutral and ground over here. Then you have your grid, which is over here or here. The only difference is on this one, keep in mind, it is a 220 device, so you do have two hot wires. And then your hot wires in conjunction provide 240 volts, which is one of the features of this that you don't see on the Pikachu. That said, let's talk a little bit more about paralleling units. Because in addition to being able to parallel this unit to provide, let's say, two 6,000, giving you 6,000 on L1 and 6,000 on L2, thus giving you 12,000 watts total, 6,000 on each L, you could just as easily parallel 4 of these units and get that same power. You would have 4 of these, 2 of them on L1, 2 of them on L2, and you would configure that within the parallel system. If I remember correctly from the specs we were looking at earlier, you can parallel up to, how many was it? It was a lot. How many was it? Let me just switch over to that screen for you and see if I can let's see. Parallel inverter specifications, output, turnover frequency, PV, inefficiency, surge protection, stackable, 12. So you can run up to 12 of the Pikachu units at one time. What did I just do? One button's working and the other's not. Sorry guys. Okay, yeah, we're back. So you can run up to 12 of these at one time. So that means you could do 12 times 3,000 watts and put it all on 120 volts. You can do 12 split in half, 6 for one of the 220 volt lines and 6 for the other one. You could even do 12 with 4, 4, and 4 and do 3-phase power. Being, run something with 480 volts, big air conditioners and stuff like that. So either way, this one will support up to 12 units in parallel. 12 units in parallel is a lot of power. It is, let's see, I can find myself a calculator here. Let's see, 12 times 3,000, I should have known the answer to that off the top of my head. So that's 36,000 watts is the maximum output that you can get from a Pikachu. So you can see the ability to grow here is enormous. 36,000 watts can easily run a house. Now, it does involve keeping multiple units in parallel, keeping them synced up, keeping them configured. Also, the minimum usage, the idle usage, starts to add up when you add multiple units, because instead of having one, excuse me, instead of having one running idle usage of 30 to 50 watts, you would have 12, meaning you would have a lot of watts being burned from this being idle. Which is why a lot of people go with a little bit bigger units, because here the idle usage would be 50 watts, but you could easily get to 6,000 with half of the inverters, and then your idle usage would be half. Then you could even upgrade from this into the 12,000 XP. I don't have a link for that down below in the comments, but if you go to the comments down below and you do link on the 6,000, you'll see there on the Signature Solar site, they do have a 12,000 XP, which is basically this unit, all the same features and functionality, but at twice the size. And therefore, then you don't have to deal with the paralleling or any of that stuff. Now, there is, sorry about the coughing, guys, there is some benefit to having units paralleled when you get to a certain size. And that is, you do build up some level of redundancy. Suppose that you have 3 of these units running and you have 18,000 watts, which 18,000 watts would power most homes most of the time. At least most normal size homes. Some of your larger homes, you may need more than that. But that would also mean that if one of them went out or you had problems with one of them, you could take it out of the system and add in a new one without having the entire system go down. If you have one unit and that one unit goes out, then you lose your entire system. So that is kind of the argument for that. My opinion on that is that if I'm that worried about the equipment breaking that often, then I've probably bought the wrong equipment. I have all the time that I've messed with the EG4 systems and stuff like that. I had one warranty call on it, and it was for a freak humidity issue. And EG4 was fantastic. Signature Solar was fantastic. The whole process was just, it still kind of amazes me how easily and how well it went. But, so, that takes us over to the PV. So on the PV, we do have, on some of the older ones, I mentioned this before, these quick connects for the PV are kind of convenient. I'm a little worried about their durability. Where you're basically, you know, these are like the Lego, what are those connectors called for your 120 connections and your wall sockets and stuff. I don't like them for the same reason. You put them in there and you basically clamp them down and it just squeezes the wire and holds it for you. It's extremely convenient for connecting them. And as long as you're not unconnecting and connecting all the day and folding them open and closing them, I don't suspect that we would have much issue with them. But looking at them, they are not really, they don't look like they're replaceable. Although I say that and I take that back, that board is, let's see if I can give you a view of that. That might be a good option there. Let's see if I can switch this over to my camera view for you. There we go. So here's my camera view, my phone view. And so I was just noticing that this board, where is that camera? Right there. Okay. So this board has 2 screws here, and if I fold this back up, you can look underneath there, and you can see that there is another screw right back there, and this is just a little circuit board right here. And all of the wires, they really thought this through this time. All of the wires are connected right there to this board. And that board can be replaced, which is really nice, and it's mounted right there on this rail. So that, I have to say, and it looks like these breakers are also in that same boat. I can see behind here, and I don't have this panel off, but you know what? Let's do that. I'm going to pull this protective panel here off, and just take a look at that, and so that we can see what it is. So let me put this phone down over here. I'm going to plug it in for a few minutes while I do this, and then I'm going to grab a screwdriver and we're going to take a look under that, under this protective screen here. It's only a couple of little screws holding it on, and I would like to know if those are actually replaceable, because that is one. When I saw that, I was in the hurry to get my RV back, the system installed, and get out of town, so I didn't bother to investigate, but it's nice to see that they have thought through the fact that those might not last forever, and that they could be replaced by a simple little board in the field, meaning they could send me the board, and I could put it in, and I don't have to send it back for warranty work. I don't have to ship a unit across the country. Oh yeah, see, that's fantastic. So let me grab that camera again, show you that. All right. So we're going to go back to this view here, and I'm going to take you from the backside view this time. So this is the backside of this clip. where they clamp on the front. But you can see here, the connectors here for the neutral is common between the two here. And then the positive PV1 and PV2 are here on the side, and these are labeled very well. And the same thing's true for these breakers back here. So they have those breakers here, and these look like these could be taken off too because they're on that same rail, which is really nice. Hopefully I'm holding it steady enough for you guys to see. But you can see here, these can just be unscrewed here, and then there's 4 little screws for this board up around in this area. Let me get that above this damn thing. There, right there. So there you can see there's 4 screws here, and so this board could just be taken off. So the fact of the durability of that is just fantastic. That really makes me happy. So that means that is not something that you end up with a stripped out piece. Now, something like this board here is also, it's a little bit bigger. It's got this giant coil here, but even these are just screws holding it on, and this could be completely replaced also, which I was unaware. I think this is part of the new design. I don't remember this in the original one I have, and unfortunately I don't have it anymore. I don't know if anyone else that's watching this has one of the older ones, could confirm this for me, but each one of these seems to be modular now. This one down here too, even with the little bus bar wires coming in here, connecting them there, and this one connecting those there. Sorry about that camera flip there. As I tilted my camera this way, it flips it upside down on me automatically. And then, so each of these look like they've been componentized to be able to be replaced fairly easy. And then here you can see the PV switch is kind of nice also. It allows for a very easy off and on, and those PV wires come out of the back, so even something acting up in that would be easily maintained. And then that goes down to the board below it is much larger, but even that is replaceable without even getting up into this main chamber up here, where the main chamber up here is basically just an air intake of the filter that's on this side of the unit. For both of these units, they have a filter on the side, and the air travels across the unit and out the other side. And so, and I've noticed on the inside of these, they have plastic guardrails to vent that air across the appropriate pieces, and then fans on this backside over here to expel that heat and air. And all 3 of these fans are controlled by thermostats it feels like these are controlled by thermostats to accelerate or decelerate based on. The Pikachu unit is a considerably smaller set of fans, but obviously that makes sense that it would be. It doesn't have quite the size inverter in it or the complexity of it. So hopefully that's a bit more information than I was planning on going through, but that's very interesting that they've turned all these into components. That makes it really easy. It would be interesting to see the inside of the Pikachu unit and know if they've done the same thing with it. But this one is like we talked about earlier, with that kind of price tag, you want to make sure that you can fix things in the field, and you don't have to rely on shipping the unit back for a simple switch that a clip or something like this that breaks. If they want to use these that are a little bit more fragile, I'm okay with that as long as we can maintain them and keep them operating. So anyway, that is the basics. Randy says, and Randy, you were absolutely right. I'm going to go find these comments real quick. Give me just a second. And let's see if that's actually showing up. It is not yet. Let me turn it on. There we go. Randy says America is 60 hertz. You're absolutely right. America is 60 hertz and the international market is 50 hertz. And that was from our conversation earlier with the power flow changing directions. So, Randy, you were absolutely right. And then quick quote 1568 says, run 12 until their waveforms go out of sync and they fry your home's appliances. Yeah, that they've got a safety feature, as far as I know, that when they do go out of sync, they fall out and shut the units shut down if the communications isn't exactly correct. So I don't know of any case of that happening, but if you do, I would love to hear about it. But there are tons of inverters running in parallel all around the world, and I have not heard of a scenario of that, not from an EG4 device anyway. Um, anyway, this is the details behind these units is that both of these are very reliable units. They've got majority of the features that you're looking for. The warranty process, firsthand, I've experienced it. It was fantastic. And I feel that these units have met my expectations, and I have put links down below if you're interested in one from an affiliate link that does help me out a little bit. If you use those affiliate links, if you have questions, feel free to let me know. If this type of information is of interest to you also, I last week launched a DIY solar class, and there are links down there to that also. The class will cover every aspect of a solar system from beginning to end. We go through basically what a solar system is. We go from there into each of the components, from inverters, into batteries, into PV systems, into charge controllers, wires, lugs, wire sizes, the whole thing. It's a very thorough class from beginning to end. The big difference between that class and what you find out here on the internet, all the stuff on the internet and my YouTube channel, most of it all exists out there. There are the big difference between what you're getting today and what you will get in the class is a step-by-step 12-week process, or 12 chapters that basically walks you through the entire thing. It's all organized in one place. It gives you worksheets to calculate your wire sizes, your battery sizes, to help you estimate how much battery power you need, how much power you're using, what size wires you should choose. It gives you information about the tools that you're going to want to buy, the tools you're going to want to avoid, the things that are nice to have, the things that aren't. It's basically, it's for those that are looking to get into the solar, DIY solar, and understand the basic process and the basic systems. The one thing that I ran into a lot over the last 6 or 12 months as I started building DIY solar projects here on YouTube is a lot of people really want to do this themselves, but there was no one place that somebody had put all this information together. And as good as a YouTube channel is, it's still very much, very project oriented and pointed to specific things. This class covers the entire process from beginning to end, complete with diagrams and worksheets and use cases that you can follow through. And if you're interested in building something like a solar shed, it'll help you put together the tools, put together the equipment, put together the measurements of what you're trying to do, and plan for the future. Anyway, there's a link to that down below also if you're just interested in some information about that. Click on the link. There's a video to explain it in more detail than I've done here. But I did want to point that out. There's also a link down below for a free common solar mistakes made. You'll notice earlier today I released a short based on common mistakes that people make when they get involved in solar. I've included a checklist of the 10 most popular ones that I see down below. Simply put in your email address and it'll send that list out to you for free. So, but getting back to the inverters, I don't see any other questions, and gosh, I can't believe we've already been here for an hour and 40 minutes. It seems like we just started. But I'm going to wrap up this event for this week. I really appreciate everyone coming and listening. I do want to have a couple of celebrations though before we go. As of a few moments ago, we reached 15,000 subscribers. We are officially at 15,001 right now. Thank you, subscribers. I really appreciate it. For all of my members who get early access to the videos, you have been given you were given a ton of videos the last couple of weeks. I will try to get back on schedule and get a lot of content out there again. I know right now I think there's only one outstanding video, which is uncommon for me. Usually I have my content planned out for weeks in advance, but with the rain, it really dug into my backlog, and I've got a lot of things to create and a lot of events to get for that. So I do want to see if I can set off some confetti for the celebration of our 15,000 subscribers. Thank you guys, I really appreciate it. And members, you guys are wonderful. You help pay for all of these toys, and in combination with my sponsors and all of that. I want to thank all of them also. It's been a wonderful ride, and hopefully I'll see some of familiar faces in the DIY solar class if you're interested in that kind of thing. And if you're not, I'm not going anywhere. I'll continue educating here on YouTube, and I enjoy it a lot, and I appreciate all of you a lot. And if you have any feedback, leave it in the comments below. Love to hear it. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next week. Thanks. A lot of different solar builds. We have done everything from a $180 solar shed to the solar shed version 2 that had the solar 12-volt solar system built into it, to an RV 48-volt system, a DIY battery, or even my wife's coffee trailer setup. The one thing I keep hearing over and over from you is that I want to do this myself, but I don't know where to start. So I built something for you. I'm calling it simply the DIY Solar Class. It's a self-paced, approximately 12-week step-by-step course that shows you how you can design, wire, and power your own solar system the right way, the safe way, and without wasting a whole bunch of money the first time around buying things that you don't need. Learn from my experience. Each week, the curriculum focuses on one of the components in a solar system, either that be panels, batteries, inverters, wiring, real builds, real life situations, real designs, with all the details, with diagrams and videos so that you can follow along. I built this class because I remember when I first started how confusing my first solar system was. I didn't understand amps, I didn't understand volts, I didn't understand wire sizes. I understood electricity a bit, but fuse ratings confused me. Different types of fuses confused me. There was so much information overload that putting it all together with a random selection of videos out on the internet was very difficult. So this class is intended to put it all together. It takes everything that I've learned from dozens and dozens of builds and all the mistakes that I've made along the way, and there have been a bunch of them, and turns it into one complete roadmap that you can follow step by step and get the information you need. So if you've watched my videos or wanted to build your own system, this is how we can do it together. Let me give you an idea of what is included in this class. So you're going to get a step-by-step video lessons for each part of the solar system. Printable diagrams and parts list. Either you can follow them exactly, or we can work together to modify them to meet just your specific needs. We'll do a live Q&A session every other week just for the class so that everyone gets all of their questions answered. I've also included a one-on-one call to go over and to review your designs, or just talk about what your solar system is involved, and make sure that you're comfortable and have all the questions you need in that one-on-one setting. Not only that, but you're going to get lifetime access to all this content as I update it as we go along. so that you can go at your own pace, come back at any time to refresh, and when I add new content, you already got it. You can always come back and pick up where you left off or rewatch the entire course anytime you want. If you've been waiting to build your own solar system, if you're looking for the perfect gift for someone who wants to build a solar system, if you want to put solar in your shed or on your RV or take your house off grid, this class is for you. This is why I made it, to give you that one-on-one help to make sure that you do it right and you do it safely. Founding members right now, between now and the December 31st, get 50% off the class. Starting January 1st, the class goes to full price. So right now, if you sign up, you get it for half price. That's a lifetime membership. You'll never be taken out of the class. You can join today at mattmansolar.com/class or click the links below. Either way, I'm going to keep teaching on YouTube. I enjoy it way too much. But if you want to go deeper, if you want to know exactly what you need for your system, this class is for you. If this sounds like what you've been looking for, head over to mattmansolar/class or just scan the QR code on the screen to grab your spot. Founding members get 50% off through December 31st, and we kick things off on New Year's Day. I'd really love to see some familiar names from the comments inside and help you design, build, and update your system step by step. The link's below, and it's also pinned in the top comment.